Hello, and welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. My guest today is Christian Ray Flores, and he is an author, he is a recording artist, and he is also a high-performance coach. And this conversation was really interesting. I have done a lot of studies on Marxism, very much from an academic perspective. I was a philosophy major. Of course, you've heard me talk, from the historical perspective of him being a fraud, the whole story of the Illuminati commissioning him is really an offshoot. I won't go through that whole thing, but I actually talked to him about it afterwards, and he didn't know any of that. So this was really interesting because it was coming from a personal perspective. So he didn't have a whole lot of, academic kind of experience with Marxism. He lived it firsthand. And before we had interviewed, he had sent me a bunch of fun facts about him. And one of them was that he thinks Marxism is evil. And so those who have studied Marxism from an academic perspective know that Marx wrote odes to Satan. He was literally a Satanist. Typically when people say it's evil, it sounds like it's coming from that perspective. But he didn't know any of that, actually. This was really coming from him having lived it firsthand and seeing how freedoms, just basic freedoms that, I live here in the United States that we take for granted. And I thought it was such a great message, really, to Americans. He wrote a book. It was called The Little Book of Big Reasons to Love America. I'm not saying America's perfect. We're certainly not without our problems and our flaws. But it was really, I think, kind of a great warning to Americans to understand not to take for granted the things that we do have here, the freedoms we do have, and not just these aren't freedoms that were granted by our government. It's very much just the opposite. These were freedoms that our founding fathers acknowledged were inalienable rights endowed by our Creator, and they codified that in writing. And how profound that is, and for us to be grateful, because that's not the case everywhere in the world. And I know people have this vision, this kind of a sensibility that everywhere is much more modern, and even places like the Soviet Union that used to be oppressive, that's not true anymore. And I'd be interested to hear if you still share that perspective after hearing his story, because he says, they're still very limited in their freedoms even today, which is hard to imagine, at least for someone like me who, I'm worried about the freedoms that are being eroded here in the United States. So to think that there are people who can't even fathom having the freedoms that we do here, it is really hard to conceive. So it definitely made me grateful, and it also made me want to see that for the rest of the world, right? So I think it used to be my pinned tweet. I use the analogy of the beekeeper, and I talk about how America is like the beekeeper for the free will of humanity. And, that's not to say that there aren't incredible, beautiful, wonderful places and people all over the world doing incredible things. I absolutely believe that. I've seen it firsthand. I have traveled all around the world, and there are some incredible places and really incredible people doing incredible things. But what I mean by that is really just this essence of what is codified, particularly in our Declaration of Independence, that we are endowed with inalienable rights from our Creator, and that we are free, that we have the rights to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And this, in a founding document to be codified, is a very profound statement. And it always struck me because I woke up in 2020, for those of you who don't know my whole story. But it was really interesting to me because at the time, this was right before the 2020 election, a lot of people from all over the world were reaching out to me. And I hadn't even started a podcast yet. But people were reaching out to me just on social media saying how invested they were in our election. And I, kind of naively, and I'm not proud of this, but, my response was kind of, why? I don't really pay tremendous attention. I pay more attention now doing what I do. But at the time, I wasn't super invested in the elections or the political regimes of other countries. So it was really fascinating to me that they were so invested. And, a lot of them said their hope was hinging upon what happened here. And I do think that there is this kind of sense that, what we do sets an example, and, the world it could fall if we don't preserve free will. And I think that, again, it's not that I think humans are endowed with free will. So that's just intrinsic in being human. But I think some of our founding documents have codified that intrinsic notion, and that is what is, needs to be preserved. So this was an interesting conversation. I hope you enjoy it, and I thank him for sharing his story. And if you are watching this on Substack, then thank you so much for your support. You are watching ad-free, and if you are watching elsewhere, I encourage you to support the work that I am doing and help me keep this going. So you can click the links below, or you can head on over to my website. My website is CourtenayTurner.com. I spell my name like Courtenay, so that's CourtenayTurner.com. Thank you all so much. Without further ado, let's bring on our guest, Christian Ray Flores. How are you doing today?
Courtney, I'm very well, thank you. I've been looking forward to speaking to you.
Likewise. So why don't you tell, for my audience who is not very familiar with you, tell us a little bit about your background. I know you've lived in multiple countries, you speak multiple languages, you're a recording artist, you're an author, and you're a coach. So tell us a little about you and whatever you want us to know.
Well, I think you just actually said it very, very succinctly. But so yes, I do. I do a few things. I'm an entrepreneur. I write a bit. I just released a book. I have a coaching business for high performers, and I do some media. We have a digital media and brand strategy company. So those are the main things that we do, and we do some other stuff as well, but I'll focus on that. And the reason I think, I do multiple things is because I have this very eclectic background, basically. And I'm just trying to reconcile all the things that I've been going through, the skills that I acquired over time, and put them in some way that we can help people with something, right? So, but you asked about the sort of the multiple country background. It's a very strange story because I was born in actually Moscow, Russia. My mom is Russian. My dad is Chilean, so I don't look Russian at all. I look Chilean. And they moved to Chile when I was a baby, like literally 6 months old or something like that. And that was it. That would be the rest of the story would be a Chilean family, living in Chile. But it did not happen this way. So there was a military coup there. My dad was in a concentration camp. We ended up being refugees. And that sent us basically traveling Germany, Russia, then Africa. I grew up in Africa. And then eventually, teenage years, I came back to Russia after my parents' divorce. But I basically changed 4 countries by age 7. That was a very strange and eclectic beginning. And in the process, lots of very, fairly intense challenges, right? Obviously, being a refugee, it's not fun. There was a civil war in Africa going on. Like a year after we landed there. When we moved back to Russia, I literally saw the Soviet Union collapse and tanks in the streets, and saw a lot of poverty, a lot of need, all kinds of things like that. So it makes for a very eclectic, a little bit traumatic childhood, but also gave birth to some really cool stuff that I get to enjoy today.
Very cool. Well, your recent book was the big, great, what was the title? The big thing.
Yeah, it's confusing.
Love
it's
about America, right?
The little book of big reasons to love America. It's a play on words, and it's a mouthful. I understand.
Yeah,
that's right.
Sorry. Yeah, little book of big reasons to love America. So you've lived in multiple countries, and it sounds like you've had quite an experience, which I'd love to hear about. But I'm curious, what led you to write this book? Since you've lived all over the world, and what are your thoughts about America, and why should we love America, and what makes America different as somebody who's lived elsewhere?
Well, there's so many things that are combined make America very exceptional, I would say, in what it is, right? And I really became inspired about the American way, the American experiment, some of the culture early on, just like many children who grew up in the third world. Like we all get the movies, the shows, the this, the that. And but I think particularly interesting was to me that for example, in Mozambique, I was 7. I didn't have a TV set for the longest time. Like, it's one of the poorest countries in the world. And eventually we got a TV set and started getting these shows that were like, we're basically tuning into like South African television, right? We didn't even have our own. And they would show these American shows. And I would see, as a young boy, I was like, so these people have these very nice cities and very nice cars, and they have sort of these beautiful places they go to, and they go on cruises. Who goes on cruises? We don't go on cruises. And, you start sort of piecing together that there's literally a parallel universe. And so over the years, I sort of happened to be in places that are that are basic tyrannical regimes, right? Marxist regimes, places that have no overt mobility. Free trade is not a thing. Entrepreneurship is not a thing. So I grew up almost like tuning into a signal from the West and learning about the spirit of entrepreneurship, the freedom, but not having it, right? And what that did for me is it created in me an appetite for this kind of attitude towards life. So eventually made me a very successful artist and then entrepreneur, right? Because I just tuned into the frequency. But, when I married an American eventually, and we lived in Eastern Europe for a long time, and then we moved stateside about 20 years ago. And I kept talking to my wife, Deb, about this thing and that thing, giving her insights of why this is an extraordinary country, right? From a perspective of an immigrant.
Right.
And she would go, really, this is special? I just sort of take it for granted. I think this is just normal. And essentially that's the premise of the book, right? The premise of the book is, from the standpoint of an immigrant, it's a love letter from an immigrant. 10 reasons to love America, very specific. And I wanted to express the dimensionality of America so that Americans can actually appreciate it a bit more, right? There's so much America bashing these days.
Yes.
And many of us who are immigrants, we were like, seriously, guys? Like, you should be a little bit more grateful, right?
Right.
You should remember that about 72% of the population of the earth today lives under a tyranny and some sort of authoritarian regime. People just forget that. We just think freedom is everywhere, and it's just not. And so I sort of created these 10 chapters that you can read in an afternoon, and I wanted to give it enough substance, but easy to understand, then sort of season it with some crazy stories, have crazy stories from all over the world, right? That you'll have to like read to understand. But then I go, okay, maybe I can add a little bit more interactive to it. So I added pictures, colored pictures from my personal archives, AI-generated illustrations, and then there's a bunch of quotes from notable figures that describe the thing that I'm focusing on. And in every chapter, there's a QR code, so you can go and watch a video of me telling more stories that didn't make it into the book. So it's almost like this immersive experience that you can read in an afternoon, and hopefully you will emerge from it really excited about this country. Basically, that's the gist of the book.
I love that, because you're right. There's so much America bashing these days. And I think it's really intentional. I think it's a subversive, color revolution tactic. So I think that there's a lot to complain about, for sure. There's a lot of problems and nothing's perfect. But I think you're right. We need to be much more grateful. And it's hard to be grateful when you don't know what you don't know, right? So tell
That's
us
exactly it, yeah.
Right? Tell us a little bit about some of the experience, whatever you want to share, of living under tyranny. What are things that you think Americans would be really surprised that, still exists this day and age?
Okay, so I would say this. First of all, tyranny, lack of freedom, right? Lack of freedom is an interesting thing. In theory, you can go to many countries and you go, well, you're free to go in and out. But within the country, there's a lot of tyranny, right? There's no free speech. There's all kinds of things like that. Acceptance, right? The first chapter that I go to is, hey, you can be from anywhere and people can still treat you as American. I am like, I never fit anywhere, okay? Like, ever. Because I look Chilean, but I didn't grow up in Chile. I had like a few years in the beginning. So if I go there, I blend in visually. The minute I open my mouth, I people go, "You're not from here, are you?" Although I speak Spanish, right? But people can tell. Growing up in Africa, they called me white. You go to Russia, they called me whatever, right? Latin or something, and even in America, I speak with an accent, but in America, uniquely so, people would go, "Oh, you're an American that was born somewhere else, but you're an American." They will accept you as such. And I think that's an important piece, because I think culturally, everybody came from somewhere, even if it's second or third generation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that baseline in America of acceptance, which is fantastic, right?
Yeah.
Freedom is another one, right? You can express your thoughts, even criticizing your government. Not only is it not dangerous, it's a responsibility.
Yeah.
That's a very different mindset that most people have. If you go back to the places I've lived, and many others as well, there's so much censorship. It's ridiculous. And censorship is sort of the lightest of the consequences of you opening your mouth and speaking about things.
Right.
You can go to jail very easily. You'll get entrepreneurship is another one, right? Entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurial spirit in general, like the average, per 1,000 people in America, there's got to be a much higher percentage of people go, "I want to build a business," than any other place on earth, right? That's how people think. I have an idea. I can do something. I have agency. I have upward mobility. I have freedom. I have choices. I just need to explore them. And you'll be surprised how oppressed people feel, and that impacts the culture, right, in other places. Mm-hmm. So the average person, let's say in Russia, the percentage of people who say, "I want to start a business," is much lower. Why? Because it's dangerous, because it's unstable, because someone will take your business away. Even the government can essentially extort money from you. It's just a whole different ballgame.
Wow.
Of being an entrepreneur. And when I was growing up in the Soviet Union, entrepreneurship was actually illegal, illegal. So we would have, but we were very entrepreneurial. So we were like, okay, we have one, thing that we can do. The average salary at the time in Moscow was $150 a month, the average sort of salary. So we're like, yeah, that's not good. And we had some hard currency earned from overseas. So we would take a train to East Berlin, because we had family there. My cousin lives there. But then, you can't even leave the country when you're in the Soviet Union. You have to ask permission. And most people don't even understand that, right? Wow. No, you can't leave the country. So to go to West Berlin, you need to have some sort of foreign passport. And I had double citizenship.
Right.
So me and my sister, two teenagers, would cross from East Berlin to West Berlin with a pack of German marks, and we would get like personal computers, VHS tape recorders, bring them back, take it back to Russia, sell it in the black market, and that's how we made our living. And we're just kids, right? Our mom couldn't even cross over with us.
Wow.
So, yeah. Okay.
Wow. No, that's mind-boggling. I don't think that's something most people realize.
Absolutely. And if you read about Marxism and about communist countries, most people have no idea how oppressive it was. Mm-hmm. We moved back when I was 14 years old, right? And we moved from Africa. So it was still a poor country, but there was not this sort of state oppression presence at the time. And it's a tropical country. So even if you're relatively poor by American standards, you have a lot of quality of life, let's put it that way, right? Mm-hmm. You go back to Russia, it's like gray, cold, we have no car. We live in a one-bedroom apartment. I actually slept in the kitchen for years because there was no room for me. So my sister's in the living room, my mom was in the bedroom, I sleep in the kitchen. That was our setup, and you have no upward mobility. That's what you have, right? So eventually we sort of upgraded through our little amateur entrepreneur efforts to like a 2-bedroom, okay? Mm-hmm. Build a little cottage. We were like way like upper middle class, but if you think about it from an American perspective, we're still poor, right?
Sure.
So there's just no opportunity. The censorship was total, and like you just can't speak up about anything. There's no access to Western goods at all in any way, shape, or form, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah,
I'm curious because I know this was when it was still the Soviet Union. So I think the question a lot of people would have is it still like that, or is it very different today, or is it somewhere in the middle? I mean, I've been to Russia, but I don't know what the day-to-day living there is like.
It's very, yeah. So you can totally leave the country. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
There's definitely entrepreneurship present, but it's very state controlled, and it's just super unstable, right? It's just very hard to do business there for all kinds of different reasons that I can go into if you'd like, but basically it's hard to do. The state control is total, so they're back to authoritarian rule. There's no freedom of speech at all. Everything is owned by the government, all media.
And what happens to speak in a way that's not approved?
Well, you can be put to jail, especially with the war. It intensified, right? So if I speak up against the war and say something about an invasion of a foreign country, there's literally a law that was passed for discrediting the armed forces of Russia, and you can get 20 years for that, or something like that, or 13 or something like that. Not fun, okay?
No.
So people were put to jail. But if you shut up and mind your own business, you can make money and you can flourish and you can travel to Dubai and have a luxury lifestyle. That's totally fine, as long as you don't get into politics. Essentially, that's the thing, right?
Right.
So I can't. When the war started, I actually did a lot of work with the refugees in Ukraine because I have so many friends there. And they were all in like bomb shelters and stuff. So I raised almost $300,000 for your refugees. We built a couple of centers there. We traveled there. I was on TV there. So because of the stuff that I did to support, honestly, just the refugees, nothing political, I can no longer go to Russia because I can very easily be picked up at the airport and given 20 years in jail.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. And that is now, like if you were to go back.
That is right now. Yeah, I can't go. My mom is in Russia and she had a stroke last week. And I was terrified because if she doesn't make it, I can't even go say goodbye.
Wow. I'm sorry. That's awful.
Yeah.
That's really awful. And you were saying the entrepreneurship is really controlled and limited. And in what ways? Why? What's that?
Well, it would. So there's first of all, there's corruption, right? Just on that level. So you have to free market, not really, right? So you can build, a restaurant, you can build a car wash, a series of but you have to know people so they don't harass you, right? And then you have to share with somebody. So corruption is profound, and it includes both the criminal world. Somebody can take over your business if you're doing too well very easily. There's a lot of aggressive sort of business practices that are just, like integrity and morality even. But you can also get harassed by the government itself, saying, the tax authorities are very heavy-handed and very, very limiting. So it's just more dangerous, nerve-wracking. And then on top of that, if you add another layer, okay, imagine if you're building a business in the U.S. and everything else is none of those things that I just mentioned are there, but you have such controversial policies. You have sanctions against you. Your currency can devalue by half overnight.
Wow.
What kind of stability can you predict for your business if you can lose half of your financial assets in a week?
Right.
It's too volatile to build something very stable. So it's really hard to do business there. And some people do very, very well. Obviously, we have oligarchs over there and stuff like that.
Sure.
And the price to do well ultimately is you cannot and should not dare to get involved in the political process. That is anything but supporting the party line, right?
Right.
So so that's the price you pay. It's almost like a social contract. Hey, you can build wealth, but you do not mess with us, the government.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's yeah. I mean, you hear these stories, but I haven't lived anywhere but here. So, I've
Mhm.
read it, but to hear somebody, say it who's experienced it is
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So one of your fun facts, you were saying that Marxism is evil. I've actually read it was Vumbrandt and Kengor wrote
Mhm.
books about Marx and Satan. Like he actually wrote literal
Oh,
odes.
really?
Yeah, like he
Yeah.
actually wrote like, homages. So he
Mhm.
was kind of like a self-avowed Satanist. So that's it. Yeah, you were saying that it's evil. So I'm guessing that's not why you think that. But what are your thoughts on Marxism? What are your thoughts on it in general? With your experience, how have you experienced it in the other countries you lived in? And
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on Marxism and culturally infiltrating in the United States at the moment?
So, well, first of all, it has never produced, not even once, in any way, shape, or form, prosperity.
It's true.
Ever. It just hasn't happened, right? And then there's always someone who says, "Well, they didn't do it right." Of course, yeah,
Of
right.
course. Yeah.
Uh,
You just didn't
um,
read him carefully enough. You don't really understand. I hear that all the
yeah,
time.
yeah. So it's just it's so stupid. The So on a high level, I think what's really interesting for people to understand is that the reason I think it's evil is because it uses something that is very deeply human and almost primal, right, in us, which is a sense of jealousy, envy, and entitlement and victimhood. Like that little cluster of human emotions. And the thing is, no one is immune from that, right? So if you're hanging out with someone who is like way prettier or richer or all of it than you feel a little like, I wish I had your resources, kind of thing, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just very human. And you're tempted to do that. You might not end up feeling that way, but you're definitely tempted to do that, right? Feel a little inadequate, a little inferior, or maybe even envious and jealous, or maybe even bitter. That's always been all of the history of humanity. We feel that way. So what Karl Marx does, he takes that very primal feeling and goes and basically divides any society into like these binary groups of people, not caring about individuals at all. So these are the people that are the victims, and you go, okay, you're the victim. Do you feel bad? Yes, I feel bad. Are you oppressed? Yes, I feel oppressed. Okay, all of you that belong to this particular thing, you're the victim. And then you're the victim because those guys over there are the ones who are making your life miserable. And so, the evil begins when you go, okay, so how do you, so they point out something obvious always, right? It could be racism. It could be, the original Marxism was around oppression of the bourgeoisie, of the people who have a lot of money in factories and giving subhuman conditions to the workers and not paying them well, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the proletariat, it was the workers, were the victims. The bourgeoisie, the people who owned the means of production, they were the oppressors. And basically, it's this binary view of the world. And so they capitalize on something obvious that everybody sees. Yeah, man, that sucks, right? That's not right. But then you go, okay, what's the solution? What the solution is, we will take from these that are bad and we'll give to these that are victims. And that's where the evil comes in, because they go, well, who's going to do that? We're going to do that. We are the enlightened ones. We're the state. We who tell you that you're a victim and they're bad, we will take it upon ourselves to determine who are the bad ones. And we're putting a whole class of people on the bad ones. And then we'll make sure they pay, right? They're destroyed. They're diminished. And we'll take from them and we'll give it to you. And then we need to determine who the good ones are. We get to do those things. And so it's really a false religion. And then on top of that, because there's other things that are
very religious.
So what and they know it.
Well,
so what they
he
do
said it. I mean, that was the original. It was a confession of faith originally, and they changed the name. But yeah.
But also they identify religion in general as as the opiate of the masses.
Yep.
So what they do is they want to dethrone, let's say, the Christian faith, because the Christian faith is a threat to their authority.
Yes, to their religion.
So they will, to their, and they don't call it religion after, it's a secular religion. That's what it is, right? And they will demolish any threat. So religion is a threat. They will literally massacre priests in mass, blow up churches all over, turn them into museums or classrooms or even just storage rooms for stuff, including like armaments, right? So that's really evil. They spent 75 years crushing the spiritual side of a whole nation, not just a whole nation, a group of nations.
Yeah.
So they remove God, right? They remove God.
Yeah.
And what happens is with that, you remove the moral framework of a people, and they infuse their own moral framework, right? So it's a very demonic kind of mindset. So that's super evil, and of course, it resulted in about 100 million dead in the 20th century. All over the world, including China and places like that. Now, what makes it evil today? You ask about infiltrating, right? Is that it's such a simplistic, such a basic, but very effective and sticky strategy that is not founded on facts ever. Like, it wasn't even originally founded on facts, right? The guy has no idea what he's talking about, okay? It just sort of took a life of its own, right?
There's much evidence to indicate he was a plagiarist, but yes, go on.
He was a terrible human being, right? Yeah, terrible human being on all kinds of levels, right? But you can apply that same principle, almost like a mutated virus, to a new society. So in America, you can apply it to race. That was sort of the classic. The classic is black, good; white, bad. Take from white, give to good. It's like caveman talk, right? It's so primitive.
Yes.
And of course, there's no nuance and no base to that's going to fix anything. Like, that's secondary.
Right.
But the whole thing is to make a lot of people believe that this is bad, these people are bad, these are good. As a group, label them as evil and good, and then you are the Messiah, right? You're the enlightened one who gets to decide who's good and who's bad. You're the God. You get to send people to one place or another, and you are aspiring to take from ones and give to the others. And it's called an economic. So I got a master's in economics in the Soviet Union. So I actually studied Karl Marx, right? And the idea is that it's literally not how economics works at all. Yeah. So the way he looks at economics is that the economy of a group or a country is a pie that doesn't change sizes. It doesn't grow, which is just not true.
Right, obviously.
It wasn't even true during his lifetime. The Industrial Revolution grew the pie, like massively, and it just lifted billions out of poverty but he disregarded that. So it's a pie. The rich have a lot of the pie. You have almost none of the pie. We'll take from the rich, give to you. Everybody's going to be happy. That's not how it works at all. First of all, the key to prosperity is growing the pie. Is not cutting it up.
This is basic math, yes.
And the key to poverty and to stopping productivity and that growth of the pie is taking from the people or making it grow.
Yes.
These are the people that make it grow. These are the people that take the risks, get the capital, build the factories, hire people, develop new technologies. They invent stuff. They're the people that make the pie grow so that more people have more pie. Right. So if you want to tax them to death, punish them, or and in the Russian Soviet Union, kill them, what's going to happen? The pie will not only not grow, not only the poor are not going to get their a little bit of a slice, a bigger slice, the pie will shrink. Yes, of course. So that's how it works there, but also how it works now in modern America, right? Because you're saying, okay, these people against this people, let's put them together, and then I am the enlightened Messiah who will tell the bad people how to be nicer to the good people that they've oppressed. I get to decide. I get to teach them. So all that DEI stuff, that's what it is. It's like the one thing that shocked me the most in America about is that it actually made its way into the military, which I was like, the military? Are you serious?
Right.
Like who bought that? I don't understand how that even worked. Like, why didn't people in the military push back? This most stupid thing ever for the military, especially, right?
Of course.
But sure enough, they were doing DEI stuff in the military, and it was just. So for those of us who grew up in those places, we're like in disbelief. Seriously.
Yeah.
Like you can be from Venezuela, from Cuba, from Russia, from Bulgaria, from any of those places, right? We come here. God bless America. We're grateful to be here. And then this starts happening and we go, what is happening? Right. So
Right.
essentially a big part of me writing the book was oh my gosh, I should write these things down and explain it a bit and break it down a little bit for people. Right. So
People
yeah.
understand. Yeah. Why do you think people fall into that? I mean, the whole DEI thing just seems so, it defies all logic. I mean, even by their own justification, there's actually no logic to it.
No, it's zero. I think it's honestly victimhood and entitlement. Mm-hmm. People, it's so much. It's for me. Look, I'm a darker skinned guy. I have an accent. I come here, to America, and I can have a failure, have two failures, have a rejection, have whatever, right? Just not do well and struggle, which I have, by the way. Mm-hmm. And I can basically hide behind racism and go, yeah, it's because of my color of my skin. This is a very racist country. I can say that and I'll feel better, maybe. Mm-hmm. In the long run, I won't, because it's not going to improve my situation in any way, shape, or form. And the truth is, I've been here for 20 years as a man of quote unquote color, whatever that means. It's just stupid even to say that. I've never, ever been deterred, minimized, spoken disrespectfully to by anyone in 20 years. Mm-hmm. I've had maybe 2 instances of people who were racist, but that has nothing to do with the systematic problem in a country at all. It's just people.
No, race.
Right?
Yeah.
People can be stupid. People can be mean. People can be racist. It could be okay.
Yep. That's people.
It's people, Yeah. So, but it's the most accepting, inclusive country I've ever lived in. So to see people painted as something different, I find it to be deeply offensive, to me even. I go, what are you talking about? So, but I'll give you an extreme example if you'd like, mm-hmm. that will rock your world, right? of how that is applied. So the Bolsheviks who took over Russia,
yeah,
and they assassinated the Tsar, all his family, kids, everyone, right? They approached that with that same lens. They approached agriculture, right? Okay,
yep. The kulaks.
So there's a bunch of the bunch of farmers. One of the most fertile places on earth is Ukraine.
Yeah,
right?
The breadbasket of Ukraine. Yep.
The breadbasket of Ukraine. My great-grandfather was a Ukrainian farmer. Mm-hmm. And his name was Lavrentiy Levchenko. And he was a little bit better than the next guy. Mm-hmm. Maybe he had an extra cow, He was not this sort of landlord with a castle. No, he's just a farmer who maybe has a slightly better house. Right. He's a little bit more entrepreneurial, a little bit more hardworking. Maybe he even had a guy or two work for him. And they come to him and they take everything from him.
Yep.
And he's just lucky because he's not killed on the spot. He gets exiled to Siberia on the border with China somewhere. And that's what they did with everyone.
Yeah.
They would come to you and say,
them.
"You are." Yeah, they would go, "You are."
For having an extra cow or for having a slightly better yield of crops. It was truly evil.
And those were the people. They're not even factory owners or big farmers. They're just slightly more entrepreneurial. Those are the people that grow the pie.
Yes.
And you kill them and you take everything from them, and then you bunch the rest of them into a collective farm. Yep. And say, now you're going to collaborate. And by the way, you're not going to get land. And by the way, we'll take away all of your documents. You can't even go anywhere.
Yeah.
For decades. and 6 million people starved to death.
Yes.
6 million people starved to death in Ukraine.
Yeah.
That's how it looks like and feels like. Okay, tell me after that, yeah, they haven't done it right.
Right.
No kidding, right?
Yep. Yeah.
No kidding.
Devastating. Truly devastating.
It's devastating, yeah.
And so few people.
My great grandfather started over in Siberia.
Wow.
During the war.
Wow.
All of the extended family, my grandma with 3 daughters, 3 babies, left on the last train, literally under bombardment from the Nazis. Wow. Literally, they were catching up with the train and dropping bombs on it.
Oh my gosh.
And she made it out, and they made their way eventually to Siberia to see my great grandfather. And and there was famine in the land.
Good.
And this guy, who was taken everything away from, by the time they came to him, what did he have? He had a house, he had a couple of cows, he had some pigs, he had some chicken, and he fed 25 people of the extended family for years.
Wow.
When there was hunger.
Right.
That's what they destroy.
Yes.
They destroy the very people who built. And that's Marxism. So I get real intense about this, as you can see.
Yeah. No,
to make a point.
I'm welling up with tears. It's very emotional, and it's tragic because most people don't know. In fact, I think it was last week or maybe the week before I had brought it up. We do a show called Dangerous Dames. My co-host is Dr. Lee Merritt, and she didn't even know the story of the kulaks and the breadbasket of Ukraine. And I mean, she's very erudite. Yeah. She's a doctor. It's not a dig at her. A lot of people don't know this story, and so rarely is it told. During 2020, there was a movie, and I wish I remembered the name of it, and it was about the story of Durante, right? William Durante, the journalist, I think for the New York Times.
Oh, yeah. Right? I've heard about him, yeah.
Yeah, so they actually told the story of the breadbasket of Ukraine, but it's so rare. You have lots of films made about Nazi Germany, which of course was an atrocity. Not that story shouldn't be told, but you rarely hear about the breadbasket of Ukraine, the tyranny of the Soviet Union, the Maoist regime. I mean, all of these various communist regimes that were all these, the tyrannies that led to hundreds of millions of deaths. I mean, the numbers change. It's really hard to get an exact statistic, but we know it was more than 100 million. As far as I'm concerned, 1 million is too many, People should not have to suffer for this type of, sinister type of ideology.
And when I returned to Russia, I was 14 years old. It was still the Soviet Union. It was mid-'80s. That sort of the worst of the worst was past, so it's much more mild compared to even 40 years before that. It was where Stalin was still alive, and he was just devastating, his own country. He was killing his own people, and but I felt it. It was so the fear. I brought it up in high school a couple of times. I was like, hey, why did we kill all the czars and the kids and everything? And there was a hush in the class. So think about this. Mm-hmm. These are 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds who already know there's certain things you shouldn't speak about.
Right.
How does that bother you? It bothers me.
Yeah, they were indoctrinated. Yeah.
They were already indoctrinated, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I said something wrong, I guess, and I did that several times. And they would just write it off like, oh, he's the foreigner. Like, just let it go. That kind of thing, right? But I was the one who should let it go, right? Yes. And it was just everywhere. It was the kingdom of mediocrity, right? Mm-hmm. There was no upward mobility, no creativity, no freedom.
Yeah.
And to me, that was just, I couldn't do it, Like to get, I was a musician. I became a really popular musician after the fall of the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. But before that, I was, you can get music in the black market. Mm-hmm. But if you want the newest stuff, you can't get it anywhere. There are no stores that give you the latest records, for example, from the West, right? So we would tune into shortwave radio to Voice of America.
Wow.
And they had jamming stations to try to jam the signal. Mm-hmm. So you would tune in the middle of the night, it was still very fresh that neighbors would inform on neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
So you listen to it quietly because you were aware, you know what, there is a small chance that you'll get a knock on the door, by the KGB. It's much more relaxed, but the memory of people being taken away in the middle of the night was still fresh in people's minds.
Sure.
So we would listen quietly, and there was this one show that had the top hits of America, and that's what I was looking for. I just wanted the fresh music. That's all I wanted.
Wow.
You know how limiting that is, that
Yeah.
you can't even you don't have access to the things that you want to have. There's forbidden plays, there's forbidden books that you can't buy, and they're banned.
Mm-hmm.
So you type them up on a typewriter, several copies, and you distribute it through families and friends and groups of friends, and you discuss it in little kitchens over vodka, right?
Yeah.
Like the Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
Right.
Illegal, right?
Wow.
Illegal. I mean, it almost feels like a dystopian movie, but that's the reality. I lived it. I was there.
Right.
You
lived it.
So I did. So the minute I see people bringing that kind of stuff to America, I speak up.
Yeah. What would your warning to Americans be? Because I'm very concerned about the infringement upon freedoms here.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts? What would your warning to Americans be?
Just look, anyone who will in any way, shape, or form limit your voice, push back, basically. If anyone comes in and starts saying the rich should pay their fair share, push back, because it's code for recarve the pie.
Right.
It doesn't mean that the rich don't contribute. Of course they contribute.
Sure.
But what you're saying, you see the difference of tone.
Proportionally, they'll contribute more. I mean, 1% of a million is much more than 1% of 100, right?
Yeah. Of course, the rich. When they say that the people, the Bernie Sanders of this world, right? When they say those stupid things, they have no idea. They know actually what reality is, but they just sell this thing wholesale, right?
Yes.
Everybody knows that if I am a capitalist, if I risked my energy, my talent, my capital, I could have lost everything, but I didn't, and I made it, and I made it big. I'm smart enough, I'm gritty enough to do that, and I create jobs, I provide for families. My goods are in demand, which means they're good just by itself. You don't have to be charitable necessarily, and it's good to be charitable, but you're doing good by doing good business.
Right.
If you tell me this is how much, these are the taxes and they're low, I go, yeah, I want to be a contributor to the society, I will pay. If somebody says double that because you need to pay your fair share, do you think I'm going to just stay there and do it? Of course not.
Right.
And there's real data when people raise the taxes, the actual amounts collected by the federal government drop. So you can operate with rhetoric, or you can operate with actual facts.
Right.
Which means, how much are you going to collect for the federal government? More. Okay, lower the taxes. People will give voluntarily. Try to make them give. They will move.
Yeah.
They know how to avoid doing that. They just move their capital to another country. That's it. It's that basic.
Exactly. Yeah, it just takes everything offshore. And the wealthiest people know all the tricks. So
yeah, absolutely. So you actually are doing a disservice to your country by doing that kind of thing. But that's the kind of rhetoric that it's really directed to inflame jealousy, victimhood, and point the finger at somebody as the culprit of your own misery.
Right. Sure.
That's what it is. And that's the Marxist signature move. They will point something that's real. Let's say there's poor people. Is that bad? Of course it's bad. Duh, genius. Thanks for letting me know. Right.
Right.
But then they will spin it and go, oh, see, that's bad. Okay, so if you have a heart, you will support me being essentially the Messiah.
Right.
And we'll just recarve the pie and give it to the poor, which never works ever.
No, it has not worked in all of history. So. What do you see about the direction the country is going? Like, what are your thoughts on the new administration? What are your thoughts on,
I was honestly super critical of Donald Trump for a long time. I still have concerns about the character, about the moral fiber. I've definitely warmed up personally towards the work, right? And more specifically, I've warmed up because this new government has a really good team of doers and not just talkers, and a really good team that is very well known for their sort of free market ideas and convictions, which I am a huge proponent of. So the libertarian DNA in this new administration makes me super happy, because that's sort of my general philosophy. Is free market, free capitalism. It grows the pie. Everybody gets a better life, basically. So I'm definitely optimistic. I'm a little concerned, just character-wise, because when somebody has such a strong opinion, such a big personality, and operates with such black and white rhetoric, my concern with the new president is that will he listen to his advisors? That's my concern.
My concern is a little. Pardon, go on, yeah.
But he has really good advisors. That's what makes me like warm up towards the whole idea, is that I go, man, these are really good people, right? Quality people, stellar people. Some of them from the other camp, which tells you a lot about somehow, he was able to win them over, bring them in, and these are great people, Okay. I mean, I haven't seen a team more impressive since I've been here.
Oh, wow. And you've been here 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
20 years. My concern.
I've been a citizen for a long time, and I've voted a long time. I've been voting for a long time, but this is, in my opinion, the best team I've ever seen since I came.
Okay, well, I'm going to hope that your optimism is, foreshadowing. I'm more concerned about his team, actually. I'm not so thrilled.
Are you? The other way around.
Yeah, the other way around. I'm more concerned.
Tell me about that.
I just think he's surrounded by a lot of technocrats. I think he's surrounded, and I'm very concerned about the technocratic fascist bent. I'm also seeing him kind of surrounded by some of the neo-integralists. And both of those I think are very concerning trajectories for this country.
Who are the neo-integralists?
Well, I would say Vance is both. He's both a neo-integralist and technocratic liaison.
Really?
Yeah, he was a Teal protege, right? And there's a lot of Teal kind of affiliations in the administration. And I think some of those, the technocratic bents are very concerning to me, especially now they just launched the Project Stargate, right? So I don't love some of that. I find very concerning. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so many things can go south 100%.
Yeah. I mean, there's some really great things already. I've seen some things that I'm very encouraged by. But some of those things do concern me. And I think there's also just some of the, it's great that he got us out of the WHO, but he should take us out of the UN altogether, in my opinion. I think that there should be complete severance of ties, at least a defunding altogether. At the last statistic I read was that we were funding a third of the UN. That's a very significant portion. They recently released all the USAID numbers, and those were quite shocking for people. Well, what about the UN that we fund? We're funding a lot of these policies, and I've been very active locally in government policy, the state level, so not super local, but not just federal. And a lot of the agendas that are being carried, at least in this state, and I'm seeing it across all 50 states, really, but a lot of the agendas that the governors are carrying are coming from supranational entities. They're coming from things like the UN. A lot of this DEI is part of the ESG metrics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that was just ridiculous. And I would say the one thing, I think you're right. The technology, it's so much power in the hands of unelected officials. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yes.
Right. I mean, it is absolutely scary. I agree with you on that part. What I do think also, and that's a double-edged sword, right, is that technology is the competitive edge of America.
Of course. Yeah.
Always
I'm
has
not
been,
anti-technology. I'm talking to you through technology.
Yeah. So meaning technological advancements, innovation, And that is always scary. There's always a dark side to it. That's what I mean, right? But then
Whose
you
hands
can't.
it gets up and ends up in, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think, but technology is literally the most important competitive edge America has. Fundamentally, that foundationally it does,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
Because of the nature of creativity, freedom, entrepreneurship, it is the most
Efficiency.
conducive place. Yes, the most conducive place for people to come up with things that solve problems at a different level for cheaper, bigger, etc.
Yeah.
So I think that's massive.
Yes.
And then, of course, on the dark side of that is that it's usually led by people who, because this is capitalism, that amass this massive levels of influence. And I think, perhaps some sort of breaking down of monopolies rather, is probably the right thing to do, just morally for the country.
Yes.
In this trajectory.
Even
But on the other
constitutionally,
hand,
right?
absolutely. Like it's like clearly there's monopolies here that are not being addressed and probably being, they're probably being sort of pushed back against by lobbyists that are are throwing a bunch of money at our government officials. On the other hand, I think not equally, but even more dangerous is the massive, just bloated government agencies. So the Doge thing, although it does sound like they're like using an axe, not a scalpel, to so they're like not taking any prisoners. So I just don't know just how much damage of good things along removing bad things is going to happen. But I really think that is like government bureaucratic, almost like a cancer, right? Like how many agencies? No one knows how many agencies. No one knows. How is that possible, right? That we're paying for like 400 plus agencies that no one knows even how many they are, right? There's something foundationally terrible about that.
I agree.
And I think immediately of the Soviet Union, right? Which is that's the inefficiency, lack of competitiveness, the mediocrity, the eventual bankruptcy results in it's the result of inflated government and too much government control, which is happening in China. And China is going to go down the tubes as well because of the same problem. So if we in America have some sort of cleansing, right, almost like a reset, and actually just really decide, okay, these are the things that are needed and everything else has to go, I think it would be a very good thing for the country in the long run. Yeah. Because it's almost impossible to do, actually,
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was the idea, the vision of the founding fathers, right? It was limited government. It wasn't,
exactly.
Constitution wasn't written to give rights to the government. It was to protect the inalienable rights of the people and then to preserve self-governance.
But government tends to grow and resist being cut down, right?
Yes,
that's just the nature of the beast. So no one's going to give you power back. It's not it doesn't happen of itself. Yeah, exactly. So I think the Doge thing, even though it is like, I like this picture, it's like a bulldozer situation, right? Like I'm a little concerned about maybe they're just too aggressive. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's the only way. But fundamentally, I think it's a huge deal that they were able to decide this is what we're going to do, and I think it's going to be very beneficial in the long run. I hope it doesn't hurt too many people, because I understand these are real people with livelihoods and stuff like that. So I have compassion towards the people. I just think that the machine needs to be dismantled, essentially.
For sure. No, the departments need to go. I have other concerns with Doge, but my concerns are not about the eradication of these bloated bureaucracy institutions. That is not a concern at all. I'd like to see 99% of them gone. And a lot of the appointments that he was making were very concerning to me. I was like, why are we appointing these people? I thought we were going to get rid of, like, for example, the Department of Education. I thought we were getting rid of it altogether. Why are we making these horrendous appointments?
Maybe I'm not following closely enough. Maybe you have a better pulse on what's going on. So
No, that's I spend a lot of time doing this, and it's not always fun. So,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
you do so you do coaching. What type of coaching do you do specifically?
I usually work with professionals, and it could be in any space that really want to be at the top of their game for
Mm-hmm.
a long time. It's a high performance coaching program.
Right.
And specifically, I purpose-driven professionals. Sort of, I see that on the screen.
Yeah, yeah.
It's because I want to work with people who want to do good in this world, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be a nonprofit kind of situation, but people that want to change the world changers.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to work with people who want to dare greatly.
Mm-hmm.
And if you dare greatly, you need to develop some qualities, some lifestyle changes to be at the top of your game,
Mm-hmm.
or you will, suffer because you're doing hard things.
Mm-hmm.
Hard things cost people, sometimes their families, sometimes their emotional health goes down the drain. I mean, we just know for a fact that most startups fail, and most startups fail. I speak to venture capitalists all the time, and all of them agree. They don't fail because the product is not good. They fail because people fail. People they just can't handle the chaos that it is starting a new business. So
Yeah.
so we basically take them through a 9-week program, and we deal with how to give them the habits to develop creativity and flow every single day of their lives, so they're at maximum joy, maximum clarity.
Mm-hmm.
How to not lose direction, not go in circles, right? Because it's very easy to do, especially when you're starting off. How to combat sort of these thoughts of defeat, stress, the self-sabotage, the imposter syndrome, which is inevitable. Anyone who wants to do anything significant will be attacked by those thoughts because it's a very primal human thing. And then ultimately we teach them sort of the dimensionality of their life. And basically we say, look, you are not your work. You're also your family. You're also your marriage. You're also your finances, your body, your nutrition, your spirituality. All of it makes you, if you grow all of these things, you will be a much more successful professional, actually, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the normal temptation of a high achieving professional is to like overkill the professional and underdevelop and underinvolve in sort of their inner game and their family game, their health, even their finances sometimes. So they're sort of lopsided.
Mm-hmm.
So they can have success in the short run, but they can burn out and actually be super defeated in the long run.
For sure.
And we try to fix that.
What do you see as like the common thread amongst most of the people you work with, and what do you see as like the thing that across the board you find helps most people?
Well, the common thread, I think, I was that guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't talk about that, but my first rather professional success, I was 23 years old, and I was out of university in Russia, and I was musical my whole life. I'm like, you know what? Everybody's going into banking. I'm super bored with that.
Yeah.
Let me do music, which is like the most impractical thing you can possibly do, right? Straight out of college. And I was just at the right place at the right time. I had some talent, some work ethic, and I became one of the top artists in all of that territory of Russia, like 15 countries. I was entertaining millions of people. I was playing sports arenas. And at the peak of that, I had a string of hits. And at the peak of that, I had so undermined, my inner world collapsed under the weight of the fame and the responsibility and the high stakes and all the things. The cracks in my character showed up. And I was literally clinically depressed as I had a number one hit, right? So that really characterizes a high achiever. High achievers are very, very driven. They're incredibly hardworking. They can just lay down their lives for the thing that they're doing. And because they're somewhat lopsided, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're vulnerable, right? So somebody came along, and it was like I met this guy who was he was not even a professional coach. He was a missionary, a Canadian missionary, a Christian pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of got to know him, and I was like, dude, can you help me? Because you have what I don't. And he coached me. I treated him as a coach, right? I'm like, tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Like I was like, Mr. Miyagi, right? Tell me what to do. And And he just changed my life. So eventually I was like, oh, so one human being who is qualified to help you, a high achiever, can redirect the very trajectory of that person's life, and he becomes even more successful, more healthy, more happy, right? So that's basically the pros and cons, right? There's a lot of drive, a lot of passion, a lot of talent, and the cons are usually there's some flat sides that come alongside that. And usually because you're the leader of a thing, people stop saying the truth to you. So it's a very lonely place to be a leader of anything. And it could be anything, a corporation or a church. It's the same problem. So you sort of have this bubble, and you have not enough people to help you deal with yourself. So everybody's on you to deal with the thing, the corporation, the product, the service. When I work with people, I leave work building the organization to them. I work to build them up. I'll help you build yourself up and be ultra successful, and you will build your organization. I don't have to even mess with that because you're good already. That's basically the philosophy there.
That's awesome. Yeah. And how long have you been doing that?
Well, informally for like 25 years,
Right.
formally for like 3.
Okay.
I decided to just focus more on that lately, just recently. But because I've had all these systems already in place for the longest time, and I was helping Olympic athletes and artists and fashion designers and entrepreneurs, eventually I was like, well, I should put that somewhere on a step-by-step program so more people can be helped. Because before that, it was just one-on-one, right? It was just this. And of course, one-on-one is not very scalable, right? So we have cohorts. We can help more people through using the same principles, essentially.
Right. That's awesome. So it's not one-on-one. It's like a group thing that when you work with them.
So there's basically this range, right? Because sometimes it's a cohort. It could be one-on-one. It could be cohort and one-on-one. There's like 2 or 3 ways to do it, depending on the context, depending on how much help the person needs, et cetera, right?
Right.
So, yeah. And we basically, we focus on things that are very quick. You feel the difference like that week when you start. Right. And we also focus on the things that are going to remain with you and help you for the rest of your life. So it's sort of a nice mix. I'm very proud of the work we do.
Yeah, it should be. And you said that the one who became your coach was a pastor, and I think I read that you work with pastors also, right?
I do. Yeah. I mean, right now in my cohort, I have 2 pastors, 2 senior pastors right now.
Okay.
That I work with, and they're not immune, right? They're as lonely, they're leaders, right? So they need somebody to talk to and to give them some objective perspective, teach them some skills, etc.
Yeah. Did you grow up with religion? Because you grew up kind of all over, but
no, I literally, like the first time I learned about anything spiritual, I was in college, I think. Okay. And I went into like New Age, sort of very Western New Age, which is like the salad bar of religions. Like it's so easy because you take whatever, you leave whatever, you do you, kind of, right? There's just no expectations. So it's nice. But then I when I met that pastor, it's the first time I started actually looking into the Bible. But literally growing up until I was probably, I would say 18 or 19, I knew not one person who believed in God. 0.
Wow.
So 0. Yeah. Well, it was eradicated, right? In the Soviet Union. Only like the old ladies in the villages believe in God. And by then they already had churches and they did have services, but it was like nobody was there, right? So it was a very secular, godless society. And that's sort of one of the chapters in the book, by the way. I talk about how the infusion of faith in America that sort of took as a cultural baseline, right? How massive it is, in my opinion, because of the prosperity, the freedom, the moral fabric of the nation. I think it's massively influenced by the Judeo-Christian belief system. And that's something that was literally rooted out in all of the Soviet bloc.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason why they have all these problems with all kinds of things, because the moral fabric has been destroyed. And now religion is back in, and actually they made the Russian Orthodox churches like the official, almost like they restored them into their imperial sort of presence, which is sort of funky as well. But at the very least, it's allowed, it's embraced, but it's too late, I think. I mean, it takes several generations for people to actually start behaving like that as a baseline. And the United States has this DNA, I think, because of the early settlers, of how things were almost like layered together by the waves of
in our founding
immigrants.
Documents, right?
Absolutely. It's in the founding documents. It is in the actual fiber. It's not on paper, but it's in the fiber of the culture.
Yeah. Sure.
And from that stems, for example, family values, right? Mm-hmm. So like I just spoke to a guy like today who was major investor. We're talking about business and coaching and stuff like that. And I said, so what's up? And he goes, well, I have three daughters. Oh, I have three daughters. And how's your schedule? He goes, yeah, well, I always drop them off and I pick them up from school. Oh, right. What I can tell you is that that's very American. Yeah. This is a person who can afford all kinds of help, right? Right. He will personally pick up and drop off his girls. Why? I don't even know if he's religious or not, but because that's very American. There's a family fabric. There's a sensitivity to being a father. You go to Latin America, if you're rich, you have a chauffeur, you have a bunch of nannies. You're basically, your kids are taken care of by other people. Same thing in Russia, right? In America, even if you're exactly in America, if you're ultra rich, you will still drop off your kids. Why? Because it's in the fabric of the culture to love your kids, to love your spouse, and to do things like that. And that's all rooted in faith, of course, right? Right. So like I'm so grateful, and I can see that everywhere. And of course, for you guys, my wife, she's like, yeah, this is just how we roll, right? And I go, exactly, which is awesome, right? But you should know that this is not normal, right? And I grew up very, very Marxist. My parents were Marxists, and I ended up campaigning against the Marxists. I'd love to hear about that. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? Yeah, so basically, I remember I had a string of hits, and I had this one massive hit, and it was basically this anthem-y song. It was called "Our Generation," right? Mm-hmm. And it was literally an anthem of freedom, because it was a song that was also a hit song, meaning super catchy. Like you can dance to it, you can rock to it. It's awesome. Mm-hmm. And but it was the chorus literally says, our generation, we're the sign of liberation. And we're basically saying we are the new generation who is going to experience freedom and propel us forward as a people, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's very anthem, very idealistic, and people it exploded in the marketplace. It was everywhere. Yeah. And Boris Yeltsin was running for re-election. It's the second term. And he was actually losing to the communists. The communists were going to come back. He was trailing in the polls. Yeah. And that happened because the Soviet Union fell apart. Of course, things always get worse before they get better. Right. So when things get worse, a lot of people that were sort of brought up into this in the guarantee of a paternalistic government, they were like, hey, let's bring the communists back. This sucks. This doesn't work, So they were very popular, and they were literally winning. So Boris Yeltsin's campaign reached out to us, and they used my song in a lot of the ads, a lot of the promotional stuff. And we toured. We toured all over the country. We went on radio, TV, MTV, all those places. Mm-hmm. So me and a bunch of musicians as well, we did a lot of campaigning and very sincerely saying, please, guys, do not vote to go back to communism, basically, right? And at the time, you feel sort of invincible. You're 24, 23. Mm-hmm. So I was doing all that stuff. But then even I watched a couple of interviews back recently, and I'm like, I was actually joking with another artist on one of those interviews, and I'm like, what if he doesn't win? And we're like, yeah, you're going to be in the gulags, dude. And, and we're like going back and forth about where they're going to send us. And we're joking about it, and we didn't feel it was real, but actually it was very real, right? Because if they'd come back, honestly, losing our my career was like the best case scenario, for sure. So I think I would have probably just left the country if they came back. But that's how high the stakes were at the time. And he actually won. And I do hear that the youth, I mean, it wasn't just me, there's a bunch of us, the youth, like the rock the vote element actually helped him put him over the top. Wow. Interesting.
You had said that you think that there are problems with kind of this imperialistic type of religious movement occurring in Russia now. Can you expound on that?
Oh yeah, man, I can actually really expand on that for you.
Okay.
Okay, so see how I changed my posture here?
Okay.
So I have a theory. So I can change. I like sharing that theory. So if you remember, the early church was really very grassroots, right? It's very decentralized. They didn't have a building for like 200 years plus, right?
Right.
And the Christian church eventually it spread like it exploded. The beginning was very, very small. I mean, the writings of Paul, the letters to the churches, he was addressing like, 2-3 households. That's a church, basically, right? Meeting in somebody's home and that kind of thing. So eventually, over a couple 100 years, it just spread and spread and spread and spread. Then it became so big. Then you have to structure it. Then you have leadership for this. But it's still relatively pure because it's not very convenient to be a Christian because the Roman Empire might kill you for that. So it sort of automatically filters the church a little bit, right?
Right.
But then Constantine comes along and he goes, "Oh, this thing is awesome. Let's just make it the official thing. You're tax-free. We'll give you land. We'll give you this." And then that started building like the power dimension of the early church. Eventually, it becomes so big and so powerful that it's essentially the spiritual arm of the Roman Empire, right? And then it splits. It splits into East and West, and the church splits East and West. So it's like the emperor and the pope, the emperor and the patriarch, right, in the East.
Yes.
So then multiply that by several hundred years of that being the dominant sort of way of people thinking. So
there
even
were
the
those
Christian
wars for a few hundred years too, but yeah.
Yeah. But if you think about the imperial top-down church mindset is there's God, there's the archbishop, there's the priest, and there's me, and it's top-down. There, the state, the church state even,
right,
is everything, I am nothing. Right? So that power, when people take power, they don't give it back.
I just want to, right, exactly. I just want to clarify for people, you're saying that church states, that's not God. That is still a state entity, right? It's the church.
Yeah, it's the institution.
Really, it's still an institution. I just think that's important for people to understand.
It's sort of it's a human, it's now a human thing.
Right.
It's not really the church that Jesus envisioned anymore, right? And of course, there's faithful people at all times, etc.
Yeah.
But you understand how when you get power, it starts attracting some certain people and builds on itself, right? So then you have a Roman Empire. It's divided into East and West. So they have the East Church and the West, and literally the institution of the church is very, very top down. Then Martin Luther comes along, right? They invent the printing press. It becomes like the internet, right? Because you start disseminating information very quickly, and people go, "Wait a minute, like so I can read the Bible in my own language and make my own mind about what God says to me," right? And so basically the Protestant Reformation changed the culture. Like for hundreds of years, the culture was, I am nothing, the state is everything. The Protestant Reformation changes that.
Yes.
People start thinking, I am not nothing, actually. I have agency. I can choose, I can pick, I can interpret, I can make my own future. Yes. So the Protestant work ethic is developed there, where people go, wait a minute, it says here that anything you do like you do for the Lord. Oh, so I should work hard. It's a sacred thing now. So all these cultural sort of, the identity of the individual changes under the Protestant Reformation, right? Those are the people who make it into America.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Think about that, right?
Yeah.
So those are the people who say, I have agency. I do not get commands from the Pope or from a priest. And of course the Protestants have their own problems. Like
they do.
They split all the time and they quarrel all the time, like endlessly. Like everybody splits into 1,000 pieces. I get that, right? But the fundamental piece is the individual thinks of himself and herself as having agency.
Yes.
As having control over their destiny, of partnership with God even, right? Of a elevated spiritual self-esteem, right? So think about that. That produces massive economic prosperity.
Right.
That mindset. That's a cultural DNA, right?
Yeah.
If you go back, then the Catholics are like super wounded. They just lost a bunch of territory. Like they're like probably reforming themselves a little bit. They're like fixing their theology a little bit, going, yeah, I think we overdid it a little bit, right? That kind of thing. So, and then the ones who never had a Protestant Reformation, no one kicked their butts, was the Eastern Orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
So they always remained top-down imperial.
Yes.
So, okay, think about that. So that's a picture, right? Did you see the picture? Protestant, free, flat network. Catholic, still top-down, but a little bit milder. Mm-hmm. Orthodox, top-down, nothing became milder, you know? So that picture that you see on the screen, right? That's the Archbishop, right? Yes. That's the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, which, by the way, highly rumored, haven't verified it, in the Soviet times, he was a KGB agent. Just saying. Okay, just saying, just throwing it out there. You can look it up, see if it's true or not. Allegedly, let's say allegedly.
Yeah, for information purposes, yes.
Yeah,
entertainment.
But it is highly probable, considering if he was active during the Soviet times, they put a bunch of KGB agents in the church. That's how they did it, right?
Sure.
So if you think about in economic terms, okay, what are the territories? Forget about if they're secularized or not, but the culture is a certain way.
Yeah.
What are the territories that are richer and poorer? All of the richest countries in Europe are Protestant. All of the countries that are a little bit in the middle are Catholic. All of the poorest countries are Eastern Orthodox.
Interesting. I don't think I've ever thought about it that way.
Yeah, just look at the map and check it out, right? And confirm that. There is no rich Eastern Orthodox country ever on the planet. Because faith infuses culture into how people see themselves in the world over centuries and centuries and centuries, right? So they're always poor, always. Okay, now transfer that to North America. There's three big countries, right?
Before you move on to North America, when you talk to a lot of Orthodox, they will say that it's not centralized at all, that it's all very decentralized. And then the picture you painted was kind of like this. And it's all like there's a central locus and it's all top down kind of a structure.
Well, it's centralized on more than one even level, right? The patriarch still rules, like that. It is top down by definition. Like you don't see a lot of Eastern Orthodox churches split. You see some here and there, but really it's one monolithic thing. Right. Now people can believe different things within it, and they do, and they're true believers everywhere. I'm not saying it's not true. My point is the mindset is that, right? But even the mindset of the spiritual mindset, generally speaking, of the Eastern Orthodox is there's fate. I am nothing, and I'm just stumbling along, and fate happens to me, and I'm lucky to be here. I'm unlucky to be there. That's why Russian literature is like everybody dies at the end, right? It's very fatalistic. Right. You know, it's super pessimistic. And I love Russian literature, right? By the way,
Dostoevsky.
I've read Dostoevsky is super dark. I love Leo Tolstoy. You know, Tolstoy. That's my preference over Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky just depressed me. I read it in high school.
I read a lot of it in high school. Very depressing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm more of a Leo Tolstoy kind of guy, right? Or Pushkin. Pushkin was awesome. Yeah. But if you think about it, it's really not about it. I'm not saying everything's tyrannical. I'm not saying anything it's just 100% monolithic. What I mean is its influence on the culture of the perception of you and how you function in the world is empire is everything, you are nothing. Empire is a little bit less than everything, and you are a little bit better than nothing. And then the Protestant is, you rule, dude. You have agency. You can go there. You can go here. Treat everything to God's glory. Go be an entrepreneur. Invent things. Move to another country. Seek freedom.
I think the element you had said previously is really important. That it's actually sacred to do so, and you are being an instrument for God. Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that that's a theory. Again, I'm not saying I'm not a social scientist, right? But I observe from being in all kinds of places, also being a Christian now, and I was an atheist before, that those connections are very consistent, right? If you go to North America, there's 3 countries with a lot of resources, all 3, a lot of territory. 2 of them was settled by Protestants, the DNA that was planted, the seed. 1 was settled by Catholics. Which ones are rich, which ones poor?
By this theory, I'm just going to guess the Protestant, but I think historically I remember
Yeah.
that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and there were waves of Catholics, of course, et cetera, et cetera. But my point is almost like this is the thing that perpetuated and created almost like a baseline of this is how we think about things, right? And half of them are unchurched. By the way, half of the rich ex-Protestant countries, most of them are not even Christian at all. They're secular.
Right.
But the culture remains, the mindset remains.
Right.
That was planted by the Protestant view of things. So that's my theory, right? And you can see that in Europe, you can see it in North America, you can see Latin America having all these problems for that same reason. That's my contention, right? That's my contention. If they can be democracies on paper, but they're oligarchies by cultural design. You go to Africa that was colonized by Europeans, and you can actually see that the countries that were colonized by the Protestant nations are actually wealthier than the countries that were colonized by the Catholic nations.
Right.
It's really fascinating.
Interesting because I'm definitely seeing, I mean, certainly in Russia, we see a movement towards this return to an Orthodox, very Christian embrace. And there's some benefits of that. I'm glad they're rejecting some of the, degenerate culture and embracing things like family and faith. And but I'm also seeing there's a large movement here in the United States, particularly on the quote unquote political right. I put it in air quotes because I think that, that for a lot of reasons, but that's kind of the political right. The people who identify that way, a lot of them don't behave, ideologically or philosophically. But there's a real resurgence of this kind of movement where we're seeing a lot of, Orthodox is one of the biggest, most, fastest growing. I don't know statistically, but just, observing, it looks like it's really, really growing. And I'm seeing particularly in the political right sphere, we're seeing a lot of Catholic influence as well. But I think that it's interesting because there does seem to be this movement towards the way I look at kind of empire is really, if you look at the occult kind of underpinning of empire, right? Yeah. You tend to have, and you had brought up like the New Age, there tends to be they tend to work together when they need to, but you have these cult groups that are, families, and they tend to be more of what you would traditionally think of as being left wing, but they represent more of the mother feminine type of, and this is where you get a lot of that. A lot of things you typically would align with, especially in the United States, leftist type of politics.
Yeah, a little woke. Culture. Yeah, a little woke. Yeah.
Very woke. Yeah. Although the right wing has their own variation of woke, but I'm seeing a kind of more patriarchal, more masculine type of infiltration, the authoritarian type of figurehead, right, being infused there. And a lot of it is being done through this religious kind of movement that I'm seeing. This is not a dig at religion. I think religion is great, but they're using it as an infiltration
it might be. Yeah, it might be, and I agree. That's the cool thing about if you read scripture, you'll see the truth, right? This is how you can. If you study it, you'll see how it was meant to be, right? And look, it's so easy to compare and say, hey, you're claiming to be this whatever, right? This Christian person.
Right.
Explain to me the dominance, the abrasiveness, the rudeness, the lack of sensitivity. Explain, like, show me somebody in Scripture, especially Jesus in his character, that characteristic that you seem to display so Publicly using the name of Christ on your banner, let's put it that way, right?
Right.
So it's really cool to be able to discern, right? You can see it on the right, you can see it on the left. Yep. You go to Russian Orthodox, sort of that realm, and there's incredible faith traditions for 800 years in Russia, and there's incredible Christian and depth of faith. All of that, I understand that. But when it's weaponized
none of what I
for
was
the
saying
empire,
was targeting people. They're good, wonderful,
precisely,
yeah.
But you see the empire piece, which you mentioned, right? You will see on state television the patriarch would basically sort of bless the invasion of Ukraine as and he would just say things about essentially conquest
Yeah.
and sanctify conquest.
Mhm.
Show me one place where the Apostle Paul or Jesus Christ or anybody else has that tone, has that even mindset, even mentions that kind of thing.
Right.
And you won't be able to. So you can discern, just compare it to what's written in Scripture, and you go, oh, this guy's not the real deal, basically, right? He's the empire sort of creation, a mutated sort of puppet of that uses Christianity as on their banner, but I mean, it's not the real thing. It really isn't.
Right. I think I love that. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I think that's very needed today because we see so many people using it as their banner, and so many people using it as an excuse to hate various groups. I mean, I see so many Christians, particularly right now, who are using Christianity as their banner as an excuse to hate the Jews, which doesn't really make any sense. I don't know how that's Christian, but I see a lot of it.
Exactly. Or to hate the left. Like that's the one that triggers me.
That too, yeah.
Yeah, because when, and I go on shows every once in a while, and I understand they perceive it as a battle against something that is really, truly dangerous. And I don't disagree.
Yeah.
My point is, when you speak of a group of people that you disagree with, show me in Scripture where Jesus doesn't say love your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have to love your enemy. Speak like you love your enemy, and you can be very, very clear. You can call things as they are. Jesus did, like he overturned tables. I get that, but somehow you have to maintain love for your enemy when you speak of people that disagree with you or you disagree with them. So I think that's the filter that we can use towards others. We can use it with ourselves, and sometimes because of my sort of, I have this. I'm sort of an expert in Marxism in the sense that I've lived on literally 3 different continents in places that experimented with Marxism. So I have a lot of street cred when it comes to life experience in the system, right?
Right.
So sometimes we talk about it, and I talk to hosts or podcasters, and they're like, "And the left," blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, let's just talk about people. Let's talk about the right way to do things. Let's talk about the environments that help people flourish and be free. Let's not label half the country as evil. I mean, that's what the Marxists do. Let's not do that.
Great
so let's
point.
not do that. Let's not do that.
Yeah, nominalism can be really, really dangerous. It's a very useful tool, but it's definitely pernicious. Yeah,
it really is.
So no, I think that's a great thing to end on. I really like that. So if you have anything else you want to add, please do, and tell everybody where they can find you and all that good stuff.
Well, thank you for a very interesting conversation. We went into all kinds of rabbit holes. So thank you, Courtenay. Well, you can find the book online. Just look up my name on Amazon. One thing that you might want to check out is my newsletters. It's the URL is christianrayflores.com, and I put all of my best stuff in the newsletter. That's basically the one repository of everything, right? So it's text, it's the books I'm reading, it's interviews that I'm on, interviews that I invite other people to. So, and that's sort of the place where I invest my best advice, all of that stuff. So you can look it up. And there's a free version of it. There's a paid version of it. There's the ones who subscribe for a little bit of money every month. They can get, in-depth stuff and all kinds of bonuses and thank yous and signed book copies and things like that. So go there. Most of you, I think, might be interested in that and might benefit from it. If you sort of heard a little bit about the coaching, it's a very boutique sort of place, so it's not for everybody. But if you go, oh, really, I want to find out more about that, just go to Xponential.life, and it's spelled without the E, Xponential.life. So check it out, see what resonates with you on that website.
Wonderful. And thank you all so much for watching and listening. And thank you so much for the great conversation.
Thanks, Courtenay.